Hello my friends and plum roasters, as we say in Austria. Most daylight analysis focuses on the average score. Now, the average score can be quite misleading. You see, some areas in the room might be super well lit and other areas might be quite dark. But overall, the numbers still look fine. In this video, I want to give an update on a much older video, the Honeybee Annual Daylight Study. It's a daylight autonomy study to measure how much daylight we get throughout the whole year.
What?
How can we check if the light is really well distributed without faking it? You're welcome. Before we jump in, a big shout out to two new members. They joined pretty much at the same time, but one of them is Carlos Bigura. To be very precise, it's Carlos Alfredo Bigura Alazzi. It's a really nice name. Thank you so much for joining my channel and supporting my channel. If you have any suggestion, any questions, please reach out. The other one is a first for me, and it's a quite big honor because I normally don't get a subscriber who is larger than me, larger than my channel. Cities of the Future has more than 30,000 subscribers with 230 videos, and these videos are incredibly well made, well narrated, and quite interesting. If you want to check out their website, which is also very well made, also links to the videos. It's all about cities of the future. I will probably spend some time here because it's quite interesting. And well, if you go to the About page, then you can find a very quick description of what they have to say about themselves.
At Cities of the Future, we're building the world's most comprehensive and detailed database of projects shaping the future of cities across the globe. Our platform is dedicated to showcasing urban impact initiatives through rich visual media and insightful data. We bring together essential project information, timelines, diagrams, renderings, maps, and immersive virtual tours powered by Twinmotion Cloud, allowing anyone to explore visionary projects even before they're built. Beyond our database, we're producing a new season of video content where we dive deep into transformative urban developments. Using the power of the Unreal Engine, we'll bring these projects to life with cinematic clarity, highlighting the innovations destined to redefine major global cities. Our mission is simple: to empower project creators to communicate their visions clearly and inspire communities worldwide with what's possible in the places they call home.
Well, thank you so much, Cities for the Future. It's a big pleasure and an honor. Welcome to my channel, my humble, small, little world. Yes, if you have any question, please reach out. If you want to collaborate, please reach out too. All right, I might reach out. Cool, let's jump into Rhino and the Annual Daylight Study. Okay, we will start with a one-room daylight autonomy analysis using Honeybee and Radiance. This is the most simplest study you can do in Honeybee, but it's a really important one. Let's jump right in. Okay, Honeybee. We'll keep it simple. So we built one room, and we can make a box. Most rooms are boxes. I would say maybe 10 meters, 15 meters long, 10 meters deep, and maybe around 4 meters tall. Could be smaller office room. Very simple box, but yeah, that's how we start. And then we can go into Honeybee. By the way, you have to remember to install Radiance for this. You need Radiance. But yeah, here these drop-down menus. Honeybee, we have Honeybee Radiance. So we will need this, and we have Honeybee Energy. That we will not use. Probably will not use in this. We might use it actually, but let's see. First, we need to build a Honeybee model. This is the biggest part of the script. So because we have a box as a room, we can use this Honeybee room from solids. Okay, takes a while. By the way, I need to check my versions here. Yeah, that seems fine. So that's how you can check if everything's fine. That should work. We're in Honeybee 1.8 and we have installed Radiance for 5.4. That should still work. Otherwise it will give me an error. All right, we can put here the geometry. We should give this a name. room 1, right? It needs a modifier set. So there is modifier set, there's construction set, there's program. The modifier set will actually give us information on how Radiance will work with the room. So it depends if it's an indoor or outdoor analysis, and if it's about heat gain, or if it's about the visual aspect. So how can we change that? There is a default. So what we can do here is we can go into Honeybee Radiance and check here the modifier sets. And I explained these quite a lot already, so I will just find a modifier set, and there are pre-made modifier sets we can use, and this is this tool here. Search for modifier sets. We can create our own set, but we will not cover this in this video. Now, on how to do this, we can put here a panel and we can see what's in there. There's not a lot of stuff in here. There's a generic interior visible modifier set. That's what we are looking at. We want to know the interior of daylight. So how to select this? It's a bit, it's not the best way. I mean, you could just use a list ID, or you can have another panel and type interior, and then we see, okay, there's two different ones, the interior solar and interior visible. Solar is if we want to check the solar gain. In that case, we want to have the visible modifier set. So we can type this, and then now only one of the sets is shown here. With that, we can put this into the modifier set. We cannot have two different modifier sets. Also, only one is possible here. Now, we don't need a construction set, because a construction set is about the energy calculations. That would be if we use Honeybee energy. So we don't need that. Program, I will keep it for now. You can look for programs, definitely, but let's keep it simple, and we just, whatever it's in here, that is the generic office program. So it's an office, it assumes that this is an office room. Condition, yes, we keep this. It's doesn't matter for us anyway, because it's a daylight study, and then we have the roof angle, and that also doesn't matter for us for now. As I said, this is a very simple script, but really important. Now, okay, what's next? We need windows. The most simplest possible way would be that if I create now from this room, I could have more rooms. I could have more rooms here, but in that case, I have only one room. And imagine this is part of a bigger building, and it's just like a room on one side of the building, and it has only one side with windows. First of all, we could give this like outlines. We just see the box wireframe. Oh, okay, sorry, that doesn't work because it needs to come from here. And now we can hide this. Yeah, so this is easier to work now. So this is a tool. It just generates like a wireframe of your room or model. It says here Honeybee objects, and a room can go into a Honeybee model. Oops, Honeybee model is this one here. We create a Honeybee model. Without that, nothing really works. So we can put the rooms in here, and that will create our Honeybee model. And now, ideally, we put this here, because then we can see whatever is plugged in between. All right. So that's how it should look like. For now, we'll just add a window, and we play with the size of the window and the location. And the best way here is, in that case, is to work with Honeybee averages by ratio. So how that works is really, we have a room, but now we modify the room to have windows. So we go with the Honeybee model, with the room, Honeybee room, into here, and then from here we go into that. What happened here? We need to first create a ratio here, but there's also a tool which allows us to create ratio based on the side of the building, and this goes into here. Now it's all 0 at the moment. You can have a slider, and you want to put here a float point slider, and this cannot be 1. It needs to be below 1. So it needs to be either maximum is 0.99 and minimum is 0.1. And you can see now where that is. That's not good. Let's put this to the south side. Okay, disconnect. Let's have the south side. So far so good. So you can see, because we put our wireframe tool here, we will always see any updates right away. Let's stay with this. Now we can here decide if we want to subdivide or not. That's just a very simple toggle, Boolean toggle. If it's false, it's like this. If it's true, it's a subdivision. That's more realistic, really. The still height is the height of the still of the window. So you can see, you can shift that, and we can put the bigger number here, maybe 3 meters as a maximum. But yeah, with that we can play as well. And then we could have a separation, horizontal separation, you know, how far is that? And then will also, that influences the how many divisions there are. It's a bit strange, but yeah, we can, maybe maximum is 4. This doesn't look too bad. So that's a way to change this as well. And then we could separate that vertically. So we could have another slider here and change that. You can do quite a lot with this, really. So you can explore a lot on how you want to divide this, just to make it more realistic, really. Now there are other things you can add, but I just recently did a script. If you want to download that, if you don't have enough time, I will provide the link, although it comes with a small fee, because, you know, it takes time to put these things together and think about it. But yeah, that's would be another option for you. Now this is like the most simplest version. Okay, so what does the script really do? What do we really want to know? We want to know, over the course of the year, how much of the time can this room rely on natural light? And now the goal would be, a typical goal would be 60% of the time. But what does that really mean, 60%? So in order to measure, we need to have, in order to measure how this light is distributed over the whole footprint of the room, we will need to introduce a sensor grid. We need to measure per sensor grid, per sensor, how much light does this sensor receives. And we can just take this here, the radial grid from rooms. That's perfect for this. Oh, sorry, actually no, sorry, we want to use this one, the Honeybee sensor grid from rooms. So again, we have rooms, we have the model, but this is asking for rooms. So we need to put actually this here. And now it asks for grid size. The grid size is in meter. So we can just use a number slider again. I'll just put this here, 1 meter. 1 meter is good. And then we can make it smaller if we want. Let's do it 0.5 meter, that's fine. The distance from the floor is also quite important, because imagine this is an office and it's really about how the light is distributed in the height we will work in that room. If you're standing in a room, it might be different, but if we have an office where we have tables, then we might want to push this to 0.9. And then probably our sill height would be probably also around that height. Although big windows are great and nice, what we're trying to do is actually to minimize the amount of window size. At the same time, we want to optimize the amount of daylight we get. Remove points which are outside. That shouldn't actually happen if there's any issue. So if your solid is not a perfect box, then it could happen that not all of your points are inside. Then you would need this remove outside. And you can also introduce a wall offset to do that. So the wall offset allows you to shrink the grid, so there's no kind of overlap of inside and outside. So you have then 3 outputs here. One is the grid, one is the points, which are the sensor points, and then we have a mesh output. So far so good. So that's great. So now let's go to the analysis. We will probably look at some others as well, but this one is really interesting for me. The Honeybee Annual Daylight. And it has quite a lot of different outputs here. It has the Daylight Autonomy, we just discussed that before. It's basically the time on how much each sensor receives, on how much daylight the sensor receives over the whole year in that case. In here, we can place the model. That's the first thing you can place in here. And we also need a WEA component. It's either a generic clear sky weather tool or from an E+ weather file. And I will use this because, of course, it gives us the most accurate sky or realistic sky from an E+ weather file. But you can also explore the others, of course. Any of these would work. So for that, we need an E+ weather file, and that we can find in Ladybug. So we need to go into Ladybug. Oops, Ladybug here. We need this one. Toggle. We need a panel here. And if I click this, go automatically to the map. By the way, if you have any issues with this, not every weather file here works. Some of them are outdated or they have no data, but you will not see that. But I'll just go here on copy. And so if you run into issues, just try a few different ones until it works. And then you can, and there are other pages where you can actually download weather files, E+ weather files. The funny thing is, we actually, if we only use this annual daylight study, we actually don't need this in between. This is really just to create a period out of this, and that you can adjust the time step. That will actually not work because it's an annual study and it's not a study over a certain period. So you could go in here like this, or you can do like this, but leave this alone because this will create a period, and this will not work with this tool here. Just to keep this in mind. It's important because I think some people get this wrong. I definitely got it wrong. So make sure you understand that. It's an annual daylight. It's called Annual Daylight Study, and it's not called the month of June Daylight Study. There is way more in here. I will not touch that. There's the threshold of the useful daylight illuminance, for example. You can put here a schedule. This is, again, the anything which has an underscore on both sides is required input, but it has a default value. If you have more than one room, you can select here with a grid filter. For that, then it's very important that your room has a name. Very important. So you can actually filter it out. You can add here radiance parameters. And then this one is important if you run an additional ASE study. At the moment, this is true, is set to true. If you set it to false, then it's a more simplified study. So let's keep everything on. And then there are also other run settings here. We can leave that for now. You can read about it. You can have additional settings. We just keep the default as well here. And then there's a run button, a run input. For that, we again need a toggle. We can just copy one here. Oh, yes, of course, I always make this mistake. So we haven't done anything with this. Of course, we need to, the thing is we need to apply this grid back to our model. We haven't really looked at that. And the way we can do this is to assign Honeybee grid. So basically we need to use this, get the model here and get the grid that goes in here, and that goes into the model. And it's already starting running. So if you see this window, then that's a good sign for you. That means it works. Okay. Now you say, oh, but there's nothing here. Yes, there's nothing here. Also, let's hide this. Don't want to see this now. We have a few outputs here. That's also probably important. Let's go to Ladybug. And from here, we can take the Ladybug spatial heat map. We can put the values here. Still not working. And that's why we have this mesh output here. And that will give us the output. All right, so let's put a relay. It's nicer to have a relay. So what can we see now? We're running a very simple annual daylight study using real weather data from London. And we use a very simple schedule from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening, weekdays, because it's an office. So we basically created our windows, we created our grid sensors, and now we have an output. And you can see already there are some areas they're quite blue and the others are more red. So, okay, now we have a pretty solid, script that gives us a nice output. There are actually different outputs here. So one is the daylight autonomy, is this one here. basically checks the percentage of time it has daylight per sensor point. Then there's another one, it's called the continuous daylight autonomy. We could put this also in here to see what's the difference. And you can read what that all means, but you can see it kind of reaches from 53 to 91. Actually, this is pretty good. I also changed a bit here. I changed this slider here from 0.2 to 0.24 to 0.3, and I also moved the still height a bit upwards. If I do this even more, let's see what happens. That's actually even better. You can see that it lowers the one which were already in the red zone, but it increases the one which is which are more. It actually lowers the one which are blue. So that's really good. That's quite good already. I mean, we could play a bit more and see how would this be if it's just one continuous one. If it's one continuous window and it's more on the top. Let's try that just very quickly to see how that works. We could here go on true, false, and let's turn this off for just a moment so we can test this a bit. Interestingly, it doesn't do anything. That's really weird. If it's not separated, not divided, it just creates this. That's interesting. Okay, let's change this back. It's more interesting if. Well, we can just try something like this. I don't know. I don't know what that gives us, but yeah, let's see. So just testing what happens the further up the window is and how does that influences the output. Very often buildings have the light at the lower side, like they have the glass all to the floor, which is great. It looks nice, but actually it has less effect. See, the further the window is up, the better. And at the same time, it makes sense to keep it. So if we would do now the opposite, so we put it on the ground, so we could move the still height down. Let's see what happens. Oh no! Stop. That's not what I wanted. Okay, let's have this on the lower end. Some architects think this is really cool to have it on the lower portion. Let's run this again. Not too bad, but not as good as the other way around. So you might get your floor lit quite well, but then everything in the corner and the back is much more dark. All right. Okay. So we can, but now, is there a way to look at the average? So now if I go here and use average, put here the panel. Yes, it's average 80%. Sounds really good. But then we have these like ones which are actually darker, quite dark. Not so dark really, because we have this really big window. So let's go back to a more typical version, which is 0.3, and of course we also want to minimize that somehow. And then this one, still height 0.8, and let's try this again. Okay. Nobody would build this type of windows. Similar. So the most successful one was where we had the window on the top. Nevertheless, okay, so here's actually better now. You can see it's better because probably because of the windows here on the top. But is there another way to measure this, the average? So what we could say is that we, instead of like looking at the average of the output, which doesn't give us a lot of control, we could say, let's subtract, let's say the 60%. The 60% is our goal. We subtract that and we can then use the absolute value. That means we remove all the negative numbers. And from that we go in here, we average everything and we can see where we are. And ideally, we should try to get a number. The smaller the number, the better. This is also a percentage. That means 20% of that room actually don't get enough light. Now we could argue that, so ideally a good value would be below 10%, I guess. And if we want to be even more strict, we could go here. We go calculate the power. So we call this the average deviation, the mean absolute deviation. This is pretty straightforward. It's pretty good. The lower the average, the better the uniformity near your goal daylight autonomy. And then what I'm doing here is called the standard deviation. So it penalizes extremes more. So if we then go here, we would then average this, and then we use the square root. Let's see, there's a bit of a slightly different. It actually says here 22% is not great. 22% of the room is not great, whereas it here is just 10. So it's a bit more strict. But that would be another way to calculate that. So ideally, you can see already that it says here 80%, like the average is 80%, which sounds really good. But actually here, it would be great if we can go lower than the 10%. So the smaller the number, the more evenly the light is distributed. I'm aiming for a mean deviation of under 10% or a standard deviation from 22% to be below 10%. Sorry, what I'm aiming for is the mean deviation be under 10%. That means that most of the points are within about plus minus 10% of the target daylight autonomy. So it's better than just getting the average percentage of these points. So the output here is slightly different. Now there's some other outputs here. Is the useful daylight. That does something very similar, I guess. So we could go here. We could go into this, and you see, okay, useful daylight and less useful daylight, low values and upper values. So just read through this. The useful daylight illuminance results in percent. UDI is the percentage of occupied hours that illuminance falls between minimum and maximum threshold. Each value is for a different sensor of the grid. These can be plugged into the Ladybug spatial heatmap component along with meshes of the sensor grid to visualize the result. And then you can separate the low and the upper ones, the lower ones and the upper ones. That meaning that for the UDI low, result of the percentage of time that is below the lower threshold of useful daylight illuminance in percentage. Each value is for a different sensor of the grid. These can be plugged into the Ladybug spatial heatmap component along with meshes of the sensor grid to visualize the result. Yeah, just read through and try to understand it. It always takes a bit, and maybe you need to read it twice. In any case, for me, this additional kind of output of the average deviation and the standard deviation gives me quite a lot of information already. All right, that's it. I hope you like this video. If you don't have so much time, you can download a script, which is pretty much, it's quite similar to this one. There's a bit more. I haven't added the average deviation and standard deviation, but that's just a little code to add. But that comes with a small fee. In any case, otherwise you can just follow the video and build your own script for free. If you want to support my channel, please check out my channel membership options. All right, see you in one of the next videos. Bye.